In many Eastern languages, including Arabic, the plural form is often used as a sign of respect, majesty, or honor rather than numerical plurality. This linguistic feature is reflected in the Quran, where God often refers to himself using the pronoun we. This usage is not meant to imply multiple deities, but rather to convey divine majesty and greatness, consistent with classical Arabic rhetorical traditions. In pre Islamic Arab culture, poetry and sermons or speeches were the two eloquent and respected forms of oral expression. Poetry captured the aesthetics of language, rhythm, metaphor, and eloquence, while sermons emphasized persuasive speech, moral exhortation, and communal engagement. These forms shaped the Arab audience's literary expectations. The Quran, while distinct from both poetry and conventional prose, aligns most closely with the tradition of a sermon. It is not structured like a typical book that progresses linearly through chapters and topics. Instead, it is a divine collection of God's sermons, revealed in response to real-life circumstances, spiritual needs, and social challenges faced by the early Muslim community. Therefore, each passage or surah often corresponds to an event as the reason behind it, though the event is typically alluded to rather than described in full. Also, within each revelation, there is usually a central theme or message, supported by moral reasoning, examples from history, analogies, and rich imagery. This method engages both the intellect and emotions, a key feature of effective oratory. Like a powerful orator, the Quran shifts tone and voice dynamically, sometimes addressing the prophet, the believers, the disbelievers, or all of humanity, present or future. The style reflects a living discourse, not a static document. This fluidity sustains attention and builds rapport with diverse audiences across time. Furthermore, just like classical Arab sermons, the beginnings and endings of Quranic passages are often striking, profound, and emotionally resonant, leaving a lasting impression on the listener or reader. Letters combine to form a word. Words form sentences. When a sentence conveys a complete meaning, it is called kalam. In the Quranic context, a verse is called an ayah, meaning a sign, specifically a sign of God's knowledge and wisdom. Ayat vary greatly in length, as short as 3 letters. Alif, La'am, Mim, A-L-M, and as long as multiple sentences. For example, Ayat al-Kursi consists of multiple sentences in it. Ayat collectively form surahs. Surah means fence or boundary, indicating a complete thematic unit. There are 114 surahs in the Quran. Surahs also vary in length, from Al-Asr with just 3 ayat as one of the shortest, Surah to Al-Baqarah with 286 ayat as the largest surah in Quran. Some scholars count Bismillah as a separate verse at the start of every surah, causing the change in the total number of ayat in Quran. The composition and sequence of ayat and surahs are prescribed by the Prophet Muhammad under divine instruction. An important linguistic and thematic pattern to keep in mind when reading the Quran is the consistent use of nur, divine light or guidance, in singular, while zulumat, oppression, ignorance, or spiritual darkness, is always mentioned in the plural. The singular form of nur ties to the oneness of God, coming from a single divine source. In contrast, the plural form zulumat reflects the many forms and layers of misguidance, confusion, and falsehood that exist in the absence of divine guidance. Darkness can come in various forms: cultural, intellectual, moral, but light is one because truth is one, God. In Quran, the terms prophet and messenger are sometimes used interchangeably. However, they refer to two different roles. Prophets receive divine revelation and advise people. Rejecting or assassinating prophets didn't result in a divine calamity and disastrous punishment, whereas messengers also receive divine revelation, but with commandments or law to be established. They cannot be assassinated. Rejecting them results in a disastrous punishment. The Quran claims that every human being, in their spiritually pure and culturally uncorrupted state of mind, possesses an innate sense of guidance. Through sincere reflection and life experience, such a person can naturally conclude that there must be a creator, that life must have a purpose beyond fulfilling animalistic needs, and that there must be a hereafter to reconcile the injustices and incompletions of this world. The Quran awakens and completes this inherent awareness, providing divine answers and practical steps for living a meaningful life that fulfills its ultimate purpose. The Quran guides us in balancing the rights and duties of 5 major societal conflicts: men and women, state and public, conservatives and liberals, immigrants and locals, and labor and capital, especially the wealthy and the poor. Some of the key Quranic concepts are: 1. Life as a test. The Quran presents life as a test of character, faith, and actions. Because this test requires accountability, it necessitates a day of accountability and life after death, where every individual will be rewarded or punished based on their deeds. 2. Divine guidance. The Quran serves as a guide to help humanity recognize what is universally good and evil, principles that are often already embedded in human conscience. It provides clarity where moral instincts alone may be insufficient or confused by cultural norms. 3. Know your enemy, Satan and self. The Quran identifies 2 primary obstacles to moral success: Satan, who misguides externally, and lower self, which can lead a person astray internally. Awareness and self-discipline are essential to overcoming these influences. 4. Short-term and long-term objectives. Islam promotes both immediate goals, such as justice, social harmony, and moral living, and long-term goals centered on eternal success in the hereafter. These 2 dimensions work together to form a complete ethical and spiritual worldview. How is the last messenger and the final revelation different? 1. The uniqueness of the prophet Muhammad. Unlike previous prophets, the last messenger was not supported by continuous miracles or divine punishment of disbelievers. Instead, his mission relied on human efforts, dialogue, and persuasion, making his example universally relatable and applicable. 2. The Quran as the final book. The Quran confirms and completes the messages of previous scriptures. It offers a comprehensive narrative of divine guidance, particularly when studied in the context of the Prophet's life, which demonstrates how its teachings can be practically implemented. 3. It's a preserved message for all humanity. Unlike earlier scriptures, the Quran has been divinely preserved, ensuring that its message remains unchanged and universally accessible for all generations to come. Here's a few types of people mentioned in the Quran. Muslim, a person who submits to the will of God and accepts Islam as their faith. Mu'min, a believer who not only accepts Islam, but lives by its principles with sincerity and conviction. Muslim, a person who strives for excellence in faith by living selflessly, serving others, seeking God's pleasure, and focusing solely on success in the hereafter. Mushrik, a polytheist who associates partners with God, praying to, relying on, or worshiping other beings, objects, or concepts alongside God. Kafir, commonly referred to as a disbeliever. Kufur means to cover or conceal. A kafir is one who knowingly rejects or hides the truth after it has become clear to them. Lul Kitab, people of the book, who received earlier revelations, particularly Jews and Christians, who were given the Torah and the Gospel. Yahud, Jews. Nasara, Christians. Munafiq, hypocrite, a person who outwardly claims to be a Muslim, but inwardly disbelieves, often working against the Muslim community in secret. Quraysh, the most influential tribe in Mecca during the time of the Prophet Muhammad. He belonged to the Banu Hashim, a respective family within the Quraysh tribe. Muhajirin, emigrants, the early Muslims who migrated from Mecca to Medina. Ansar, helpers, the Muslim residents of Medina who welcomed, supported, and defended the Prophet Muhammad and the emigrants. Now, what I am about to say may sound strange to many Muslims. The Quran presents a precise and layered vocabulary when speaking about different groups of people, particularly in matters of faith. Terms like Muslims, those who submit, believers, mu'minun, and Ahlul Kitab, people of the book, are used deliberately, each carrying a specific spiritual and historical weight. These distinctions are not merely labels, but convey deep theological meaning and serve as tools for self-assessment and communal reflection. For example, a thought-provoking distinction occurs in Surah Al-Hujurat 49:14, where a group of Bedouins who had accepted Islam claimed to be believers. The Quran corrects them. The Bedouins say, "We believe," say, "You have not yet believed," but say, "We have submitted, for faith has not yet entered your hearts." This verse reminds us that Islam, submission, is the starting point. But Iman, true belief, is a higher state, characterized by sincerity, inner conviction, moral consistency, and spiritual depth. In various parts of the Quran, earlier communities, such as the Jews and Christians, are addressed as Ahlul Kitab, or people of the book. These were once nations guided by divine revelation, entrusted with scripture, and called to uphold justice, truth, and monotheism. However, when they deviated from the original message through distortion, division, or moral decline, they were still acknowledged for having received divine guidance, even if they had strayed from it. Today, much of the Muslim world mirrors this condition. Communities that still carry the identity of Islam, but may no longer fully live by the spirit and guidance of the Quran. In this light, the term Ahlul Kitab becomes less about ethnicity or history and more about our current relationship with revelation. Do Muslims merely possess the book, or do they live by it? In multiple verses, the Quran outlines the qualities of a true believer: humility in prayer, honesty, charity, moral discipline, and unwavering trust in God. These are not tied to ethnic or national identity, but to personal transformation. The Quranic definition of a believer becomes a universal standard, a mirror in which each individual must examine their reflection before claiming to be a believer. Thus, being a believer is not a permanent status earned by birth or cultural affiliation. It is a moral and spiritual condition. It is dynamic, subject to change, and always open to renewal. The door is never closed. Anyone at any time can return to the path and strive to become a believer again, regardless of their past or background. One of the central missions of the prophets, as repeatedly emphasized in the Quran, is to unite people on the foundations of Tawheed, oneness of God, justice, and accountability. Prophets came to eliminate oppression, not just social or political, but spiritual oppression that clouds the heart and divides humanity. The Prophet Muhammad, like those before him, was sent to guide people away from tribalism, arrogance, injustice, and false gods, toward a life of purpose rooted in divine truth. The Quran says in Surah Al-Anbiya 21:92, "Indeed, this nation of yours is one nation, and I am your Lord, so worship me." This is a call for a universal community of believers, united not by language, race, or geography, but by a shared moral vision and a commitment to serve humanity under the guidance of God. Given the moral, social, and spiritual challenges faced by Muslims today, the message of the Quran remains ever relevant. Rather than taking identity for granted, it calls each person to engage in self-reflection, to measure themselves against the Quranic definition of a believer, and to strive toward embodying that ideal. True belief is not a title, it is a responsibility. It is time for a revival, not of labels or appearances, but of the inner light of faith, sincerity, and justice. Only when Muslims become believers in the fullest Quranic sense can they fulfill their divine role, not just as recipients of revelation, but as guides for all of humanity. The Quran challenges us not to merely inherit a religion, but to live it consciously. Belief is a journey, not a destination, and the path remains open, guided by revelation, walked by prophets, and sustained by every heart that sincerely seeks the truth. Lastly, the succession of ayat superseding one another within the Quran is an important concept to consider. Again, this is my opinion. I understand that we adopt religious rulings and cultural norms from previous scriptures and nations, as long as they do not conflict with the Quran. For example, rulings like Qatl al-Murtad, the execution of the apostate, and Rajam, stoning for adultery, are not explicitly mentioned in the Quran, but were carried over and continued from earlier traditions, such as the Torah, Old Testament, see Deuteronomy 17:2-5, and Leviticus 20:10. At the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, Ayah 4 says, "Believe in what was revealed to you, O Muhammad, and what was revealed before you," which supports the idea that previous revelations are part of the broader divine message, even though they are no longer fully authoritative for Muslims. Now, the Quran also teaches that God may supersede or replace previous revelations with similar or better guidance. This is expressed in Surah Al-Baqarah, Ayah 106. Whatever verse we abrogate or cause to be forgotten, we bring forth one better than it or similar to it. Do you not know that God is over all things competent? Since the textual arrangement of the Quran does not follow the chronological order of revelation, it makes it difficult to trace the developmental path of legal or moral rulings over time. So, why was it rearranged? I believe the answer lies in the Quran's purpose, not as a historical document or legal code alone, but as timeless guidance. Its structure is thematic and spiritual, not strictly chronological. Moreover, the Quran is not a book of stories or historical records. Surah Al-Baqarah, Ayah 2 says, it is Hudan lil Muttaqan, guidance for the God conscious. So, if an ayah has been superseded and no longer has any legal or practical implication, does that mean it no longer has value? I reject this idea. I believe that every word, even every letter of the Quran, has purpose and wisdom. Its relevance may be circumstantial, tied to particular environments or individuals, and may still carry moral, spiritual, or pedagogical significance. Social circumstances often shape the practical application of divine guidance. Study how Adhan, the call for prayer, was adopted, and how fasting evolved in the number of days and timings. Norms may differ depending on time, place, and culture. For instance, in some societies, particularly in colder climates, alcohol consumption is not only common, but often socially embedded. As a veteran, I've witnessed this firsthand. Some European military forces permit their soldiers to drink in uniform, while in contrast, U.S. military regulations strictly prohibit drinking on duty. These rules reflect broader cultural expectations about behavior, discipline, and public responsibility. From an Islamic perspective, how one engages with such behaviors, like drinking or gambling, also depends on the spiritual level one chooses to live by. The Quran recognizes this by addressing issues not always with immediate prohibition, but often in gradual stages, guiding people to higher moral and spiritual ground. Take drinking and gambling as examples. These are paired in the Quran multiple times because both are appealing to human desires, and when indulged in moderation, they may seem harmless or even enjoyable. However, both can easily turn into addictions that destroy individuals, families, and communities. The Quran addresses this in Surah Al-Baqarah, Ayah 219. They ask you about wine and gambling. Say, in them is great sin, and yet some benefit for people, but their sin is greater than their benefit. Eventually, drinking is explicitly forbidden in Surah Al-Ma'idah, Ayah 90 and 91. O you who believe, intoxicants, gambling, idols, and divining arrows are abominations of Satan's handiwork. So avoid them so that you may succeed. Satan only wants to sow enmity and hatred among you through wine and gambling, and to hinder you from the remembrance of the God and from prayer. So will you not desist? Both of these ayahs are present in the Quran, which means both of them have a purpose. Both drinking and gambling are spiritually corrosive. So, given the two ayahs, we choose the level of our connection with God and take the risk of destroying our family and social lives. Drinking removes a person from reality by impairing consciousness, undermining one's sense of responsibility and moral accountability. Gambling creates the illusion of wealth without effort, distorting the natural principle of earning through hardship and productivity. Both a waste of time and money for a temporary relief. In essence, both practices disrupt personal discipline, family stability, and social harmony.